Tales of Mithrym.
Skeleton Crew, read by Lorenzo, Part 8, Skirmish. Back on the ship, Chancellor Notley paced about in the passenger's cabin. He was not pleased at all with this delay. No, sir, he was not. This was the sort of thing that could ruin a chap's reputation. It could see him posted to an even more remote outpost. He shuddered. The ministers might even think it fitting to send him to Polvesia. No, he was not going to allow any of that to happen. By Ibis, he knew he was not the smartest of civil servants, but at least he could make a meeting on time. He stopped his pacing for a moment and looked up towards the ceiling. There seemed to be some great commotion going on there. Doubtless another delay, another hold-up on the way to Kanath. Well, this was too much. He stomped out through the door and up onto the deck. The crew were running around in a panic. "Listen!" No one seemed to pay him any heed, though. He grunted with annoyance, then straightened up and cleared his throat. With a flick of his wrist and a click of his fingers, he bent his mind to a small piece of magic. Something to remind these simple sailors just who they were dealing with. A passing sailor jumped backwards as a small, bright flash erupted directly in front of them. "Ah, good!" Notley called, stepping over to the bewildered woman. She rubbed her eyes and looked at him with astonishment. "What in Ean's name is going on here?" he bellowed. "Pirates, sir!" she shouted and ran off again. "Pirates," he whispered. What in all the lands was going on that they should have run into them? There were no such brigands on the route from Angmar to Kanath. No, none of this was adding up. He grunted with annoyance. But as he made to walk away, he stopped and paused in thought. He gasped. Unless they had come for him. Pirates had heard that an agent of the king was travelling on this ship. They were plotting to abduct him and ransom him off to the crown. He began to panic. That was the only possible explanation, surely. Looking about, he saw many of the crew taking up swords and axes and heading towards the pirate ship. There it was! He gaped at the sight of it. The tall black sails were fluttering in the night breeze, and there he could see it was held to this ship by ropes. His mind was working fast. Sadly, though, it was running in entirely the wrong direction. "Stand back!" he shouted to the whole deck. His voice quavered slightly, but he'd been practicing his commanding tone, ready for his new office. "I see it clearly enough. We need to break those beasts' tie on our vessel. You will never break through such ropes as these with simple axes. Stand back and I shall show you how a gentleman of Angmar deals with brigands like this." Several of the crew called out and tried to stop him, but it was too late. Once again he flicked his wrist and snapped his fingers. His tutors, he thought to himself, who had despaired in him for how long he had taken to learn such cantrips, would be amazed to see his keen head working under such pressure. From his hands there came a splash of green that shot out and settled on the ropes. A fizzing sound and a smell of burning rose from them. After a moment they began to snap. "What are you doing?" Sam cried, grabbing Notley by his shoulder and spinning him on the spot. "Half the crew were over there!" Back on the pirate ship, the crew were still reeling from the sight. The pirates, quite openly now, were shedding their disguises and gnashing their teeth. Many seemed not even to be zombies, but bleach-white, animated skeletons, dressed in the tattered clothes they had worn in real life. Even still, they seemed somehow to glow. Elvin cursed under his breath. He hated necromancers. His hand clutched hard at his sword hilt and he screamed a battle cry. Running forward, he brought his sword down hard at the nearest of the zombies. It clanged hard against the pirate captain's sword, which she swung in as she leapt from the side. Cackles of laughter erupted from the ghastly crew, who then leapt forward themselves and brought up swords, daggers, and knives as they attacked the sailors. Ducky punched hard at each pirate that came close to him. Yet even as he knocked them down, they got straight back up again. Derville tried with her axe, but found it only lodged itself in the ribs of the skeletons, who would snarl and pull it straight back out. About them, several of the sailors likewise tried to attack, but many were simply far too shaken by the sight and backed towards the ropes, ready to cross back to their own. But what was this? Cries and shouts came up from the crew. Many turned back on the pirates to gape in horror at the sight. Sadly for several, this was punished with a blade to their back. The ropes had been cut! The ships were beginning to drift apart. Turning back, the pirates' laughter was all the louder and even harsher than it had been before. A vicious fight broke out, many of the sailors feeling they had no choice but to try. Some tried leaping back towards the ship. A couple managed it. Several tried to grab at the ropes. Their hands burned at the touch though, and they fell hard into the waters below. At that, Elvin gave another strong cry and rallied all those that were still at hand. The pirates encircled them and jeered. Derval and Ducky found themselves alongside Bonnie, who was brandishing a harpoon menacingly at the nearest zombie. Elvin raised his sword and squared on the pirate captain. "You vile fiend!" he shouted. "You black-hearted devil! I will kill you!" "Steady now," the pirate captain chuckled. "You may try if you wish, but you are on my ship now." She beckoned to a small man that came over and stood patiently. Very definitely a man, not a zombie or a skeleton. His face was red from exertion. She doffed her coat and handed it to him. "Pop that in my cabin." She raised her own sword and winked at Elvin. "Come on, then." Elvin growled. He ran forward and made her swing hard across her body. As he raised his arms, though, the pain in his shoulders cut at him like a knife and he faltered. Losing his balance for a moment, he stumbled on the deck and dropped his sword. Around him, the pirate crew laughed again, but he could not hear it for long, for as he fell forward, the pirate captain had been bringing her own sword up, ready to parry him. Instead, Elvin's head, brought down low as he doubled from the pain, hit her hard in the bellow, and the two of them rolled on the deck and went tumbling down into the sea. Elvin tried to see, but the night was dark and the waters about him were murky. Far above, he could have sworn there was a blast of white-hot fire, but he could not see it for long. As salt water filled his mouth and nose, his vision sunk into oblivion.
Tales of Mithrym are written by Jimmy Clephane. Mithrym is a fantasy world built for the Dungeon Room role-playing game system. To find out more about the world of Mithrym, or to try out the game, go to www.mithrym.com.